Good morning. Good morning, Judson. My name is Laura Jane Kenny, and today I am here with you with the search committee. It's an honor to be with you all today. Welcome both to people in the building and on Zoom. Thank you to our community minister, Brooks, for hosting the Judson Diaspora. Hello, everyone. At this time, we welcome your announcements. Please keep your mask on until you reach the podium. Thank you. Any announcements this morning? All right, well, I'll keep right on rolling. I have a few announcements from me. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Morning, Judson. My name is Suresh Nayan, and I am Chair of Congregational Life. We are still in need of greeters from next week on, so I will pass around a sign-up sheet if you can greet. It requires maybe coming here 20 minutes before service, handing out bulletins till about 11:10, and then you can come up and enjoy the rest of the service. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. Okay, I have a few announcements before we begin. Today, your pastoral search committee is here and excited to leave a service of reflection on and looking forward from the search process, which is nearly at an end. In this morning's service, we will be sharing readings, musical selections, and a panel-based sermon. Although we thought we might be ready to share the name of the candidate during this Sunday service, we are still in the final stages of that process. As of now, we've made a soft offer to a senior minister candidate and are in the process of negotiating salary, benefits, and a start date. We hope to share the name and more information on our final candidate on May 7th. So we'll see you here next week for that. There will be a congregational meeting today from 1 to 2:30 in this room, and there will be time for questions about the search process, among other agenda items. And we hope that you'll join us there. There will be no joys and concerns today, either here or online. We want folks to have time to get a little something to eat before the congregational meeting at 1. And lastly, you will notice our beloved ministers are not with us today. In conversation with them, we encourage them to take a rare Sunday off while the search committee shares. If you are new to Judson, please come say hi after the service and stay for coffee hour. And now we welcome Kari to share the land acknowledgement.
From Northwestern University, it is important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to reside on the land and to seek to understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current, ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. The Lenape, historically, are known as the ones that were in some sort of fantastic legend, myth out there called the Purchase of Manhattan. And supposedly, we sold the entire island of Manhattan for some trinkets and axe heads. But that is a myth. We did not understand the concept of selling land, having title to land, and those kinds of things. Curtis Suhinha, the Lenape, Delaware. We gratefully acknowledge the Lenape-Munsee tribe on whose ancestral homelands we gather. We honor them by recognizing that the colonialism which robbed them of their land is still today causing undue environmental, spiritual, and physical harm. We will strive to undo this damage and create a diverse, vibrant, and just community for all who make this land their home today.
dream I'm dreaming, but there's a voice inside my head saying, you'll never reach it. Every step I'm taking, every move I make feels lost with no direction. My faith is shaking, but I gotta be strong, gotta keep my head held high. There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move. Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. The struggles I'm facing, the choices I'm taking, sometimes might knock me down, but no, I'm not breaking. I may not know it, but these are the moments I'm gonna remember most. Yeah, just gotta keep going, and I gotta be strong. Just keep pushing on, 'cause there's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move. Always gonna be an uphill battle, and sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. Yeah. There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna make it move. Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. Yeah, yeah. Keep on moving, keep climbing, keep the faith, baby. It's all about the climb. Keep the faith, keep your faith. Whoa.
Thank you, Peggy and Henco. Have you gone into the woods lately? Have you breathed the fresh air, found delight in the bird song, or heard Mother Earth speak to you in the breeze and rustle of the trees? Have you gone into the woods lately? Have you been afraid of the unknown noises, the sudden crack of a branch? Have you found yourself frightened by the deepening dusk and wondered if you would ever get out? Robert Frost tells us the woods are lovely, dark, and deep. Can we take the time to explore that, to understand lovely, to understand dark, to understand deep? Or do we have promises to keep? For this moment, come together. For this moment, be here. Here is Judson, where we can worship together in this space that stretches from east to west. Come be present here in these woods, whether they are lovely or dark or deep. Let us worship together. I invite you now to join, to stand and join in singing on page 483 of your bulletin. Sing praise to God who reigns above.
Judson? Oh, thanks. I'm old, so I have to have reading glasses from CVS, so sorry about that. The ancient testimony is from the book of Exodus, chapter 3, verses 9 through 14, the New International Version. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you."
The modern testimony. Slime molds are giant single-celled organisms that are capable of complex decisions, rudimentary memory, and mapping their environment, all without a single neuron. When nutrients are scarce, hundreds to thousands of individual organisms will fuse together into a single giant cell and operate collectively as a single networked organism, using simple yet effective tools to discover the most efficient way to find nourishment.
Slime mold, it's a sort of gelatinous blob. It's a single cell, but it doesn't have neurons, it doesn't have a brain. And yet, if you put it in an environment in which there is a complex decision to make, for instance, which direction to choose to find the best food source, well, this blob is capable of solving this problem relatively easily. And this thing is just literally a jelly making smart decisions. And the question is, how something that doesn't have a brain is capable of solving this everyday problem that is absolutely crucial for its survival? How can you not be fascinated by this? We set up a series of time-lapse shots. We use time-lapse to study slime molds because slime mold moves very slowly. Their experiments last for 24 to 48 hours to be able to just see them move a few centimeters. So we use time-lapse and make the behavior of the slime mold match our own time scale. So when the slime mold is hungry, it's going to send out of this main biomass little fingers that are going to explore the environment. We're trying to figure out how do the different parts of the slime mold decide as a sort of collective, it's time to move to the right or it's time to move to the left. The different parts of the slime mold are going to actually talk to each other. If you take a time lapse of a slime mold, you are going to observe that the membrane of the slime mold is actually oscillating about every minute, inflating and then deflating.
Just like we have muscles in our body that can cause physical contractions, the slime mold has a cytoskeleton and motor proteins that cause these contractions.
This pumping mechanism is going to actually trigger the neighboring areas of the slime mold to pump harder. And it's how the slime mold grows into the direction of the favorable environment. This physical mechanism is what we believe the slime mold is using in order to make its decision. So we design experiments where we want to try to trick the slime mold to start pumping harder.
We're going to set it for 1 hour for the experiment.
We have invented this little machine that essentially poking the membrane of the slime mold regularly. We have this little flexible bar that we can put in contact with the tubule of the slime mold. By doing this, we're simulating a section of the membrane starting to oscillate faster.
Basically, what we would like to be able to do is influence the slime mold's choices, if you will, with this physical manipulation.
The hypothesis of this experiment is that it's a physical rather than chemical signal that is transmitted along the axis of the slime mold. We have to replicate these experiments hundreds of times. So it should be about a year before we can start processing all the data.
If we didn't have time-lapse, we'd miss the entire process that allowed the slime mold to make a decision.
As we learn more about the way information is transferred inside the slime mold, we're going to be able to ask a bigger question about the origin of intelligence on Earth. Where is the intelligence encoded inside this organism? And one of the possible explanations is that the intelligence is encoded into the physical mechanisms that the slime mold uses to move in space.
When life emerged and before anything was capable of communicating and perceiving anything, there was just physics. Decision making doesn't necessarily need complex communication mechanism. Often just physics is enough. I think what it makes you realize is that maybe intelligence is not that difficult, or maybe we should redefine what we mean by intelligence.
Please rise in body or in spirit for Together Wherever We Go from Gypsy. Come take their seats and why they get started. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Laura Jane Kenny. I'm one of the co-moderators, but today I am here as a member of the search committee, and I'm sharing a few notes before we get started. Your pastoral search committee is here and honored to leave the service of reflection on and looking forward from our search process, which is nearly at an end. We thought we might be ready to share the name of a candidate during this Sunday service, but we are still in the final stages of that process. As of now, we have made a soft offer to a senior minister candidate, and we are in the process of negotiation. We hope to share the name and more information about our final candidate on May 7th. There will also be a congregational meeting today from 1 to 2:30 in this room, and there will be time for questions to the search committee. And lastly, again, you will notice our beloved ministers are not with us today, but in conversation with them, we encourage them to take a rare Sunday off while the search committee shares. All right. Hello. Okay. Since the departure of our previous senior minister, Donna Scarper, Judson has been in the process of searching for new leadership. With direction from the Transition Committee and the incredible transition report, with gratitude for the mirror work of our transition minister, Reverend Julie Staples, this group of 10 individuals has been in this process for over a year. For the sermon today, we wanted to take a moment and have some of the members of our committee share what the process has been like. So I will be moderating this panel. The search committee has been practicing shared leadership by rotating the committee chairs. Helena, can you talk about what that shared leadership has been like?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name's Helena. My pronouns are she and her. We're standing. Okay. Hi. It's been an honor to serve on the search committee. So when we started this process, I think, at the very first meeting, almost the first question that we had for one another that came up organically in our committee was how leadership would work. Traditionally, a search committee agrees on one chair or moderator, and that person leads the committee for its duration. I think that works really well. It has worked really well for Judson in the past, and probably would have worked well for our committee. But if there's one thing that we've talked about more than anything else on this committee, it's been about thinking about Judson's future even more than Judson's past, and thinking about who are we as a church looking forward and embracing change and embracing new traditions and new approaches and strategies. So the conclusion we came to, conclusion feels wrong, but the decision we came to at that meeting was that rather than simply having one moderator for the duration of the process, that role and also the incredibly important role of note taker for our meetings would rotate roughly every 2 months. So each one of us on Search has had the chance to chair the committee for at least 2 months. Because of the length of the process, some members have heroically taken 2 turns, and we're extremely grateful to them. I think, unsurprisingly, there are ways in which this approach has, at times, been frustrating for each of us individually and for all of us as a group, but I think the benefits of it have so greatly outweighed the frustrations. It's forced all of us to be equally present in the process. It's given us the opportunity to even more deeply appreciate the different strengths and weaknesses we each bring to the process. Weaknesses is even wrong, but the different strengths and challenges we bring. And to appreciate, each of us on this committee has a very different way of working, a very different way of approaching work, decision-making, responsibility, assigning of tasks and process. And so we've gotten a chance to live for a little while within each committee member's sort of philosophy about the process and approach to the process. Something we've talked about a great deal is a church is necessarily something of a hierarchical system, but Christian values strive for the opposite of that, ideally, and how to embody that contradiction. And so this has been our sort of hands-on-deck way of trying to model that.
Thank you. Okay, there have been hours and hours and hours of conversation on the search committee. Keen, can you talk about what it has been like listening and learning from each other?
All right, listening and learning from each other means talking to each other and really hearing each other. So I am going to say something, and then you are going to say it back. And that's going to happen several times to symbolize the 1.5 years of our listening and talking. So what I'm going to say is, thank you for being here with me at Judson. Thank you for being here with me at Judson. And now I'm going to say it again, and you're going to say it again. Thank you for being here with me at Judson. Thank you for being here with me at Judson. And now you're going to say it to somebody else sitting near you. Find somebody sitting near you and tell them. Thank you for being here with me at Judson. Okay. Now, I am the youngest daughter of an immigrant family from Minnesota. And I am now an old cisgender woman. Nobody else on the search committee is any of those things or all those things. One of the things that I have learned is that people say things in different ways. Did you hear when I said, thank you for being here with me at Judson, that I said it 2 different ways? Did you hear that one was better than the other? No. Different people say things in different ways because some of them are daughters of immigrants in Minnesota and some of them are not. What we learned on the search committee and what I hope to teach everyone is that the way somebody says something is not the best indicator of whether they are saying something important and profound. And all 10 of us have said important and profound things, as have all 35 of our applicants in different ways.
Thank you, Keen. Snaps. Yeah, we can snap for that. Great. Okay, during this process, we've gotten to hear a lot about other churches. David, can you share what it has been like to learn about the progressive church landscape?
Sure. So back in the kind of mid-early 90s, I was on the search committee after Howard Moody left. And we got, I think, around, Irene, am I correct, about 150 applications? And they were from all over the country. And a lot of them were wildly inappropriate for Judson. And not many of them were from backgrounds of progressive, kind of forward-thinking Christianity, like we like to think of ourselves at Judson. And back then, I really had this sense of the uniqueness of Judson. With this process, we got about 35 applications, and first of all, they were just a lot of truly amazing people out there doing truly amazing things in their churches all over this country. One that stood out to me was, and I mentioned this at an earlier meeting, but a church in North Carolina that realized that a lot of its membership was struggling with debt. And they came together as a church and figured out a way to all work together to pay off each other's debt so that that was not hanging over everyone in the church, that they could be free of that and be more able to live their lives without these clouds, these shadows hanging over them. There were other churches that are doing very important work in terms of racism and understanding how it works in society, how it works in the church, and combating that. There were churches that were just doing amazing things. And I began to think of Judson as less of this kind of lone outpost that I think we've often prided ourselves on, and that we're part of this bigger community of churches, and they weren't just Baptist churches, they weren't just UCC churches, they were Methodist, they were Presbyterian, they were churches across the spectrum of really pretty much Protestantism. And that was, for me, a really hopeful sign for Christianity in America, because one of the things that has always been a terrible thing for me is the way so many people speak about being Christian and their actions really don't reflect that at all. And boy, are there people out there in a lot of places doing a lot of really important and good work. And I feel like Judson is just part of this movement that I hope could reshape the way people think about faith in this country.
Thank you. Snaps again. All right. For the answer to this next question, we're going to go to video. Jason on our search committee is in transit today, so recorded a video for us ahead of time. The process and this committee are not perfect, and we have learned from our mistakes.
Hello, Judson. My name again is Jason Sang. I'm one of the co-moderators at Judson, and I've been asked to speak a little bit on this panel about how the process was an imperfect one. So yeah, I'm going to try and distill some of my ideas or thoughts or reflections on that experience. The first, I know that many of you are aware, because I think we tried to share about it in kind of as real time as we could, through emails and in congregational meetings and stuff, that one of our members of our committee resigned from our committee. I don't want to kind of hash out the specifics of that event, but I do want to kind of name that person was a person of color, and their identity played a part in the experience that that person had on our committee. And I don't want to, kind of get into any specifics because I don't want to, speak for them or, make this about them, because what it really is about is their experience is kind of a data point in how our community, how Judson shows up in space and how we construct that space, either consciously or subconsciously. And there are a lot of truths about, about our church community that I think we're often, hesitant to name. Some of that naming happened during the transition committee's work and the transitional report. I think specifically about our kind of some of the demographic truths about our church. I remember we as a committee read that report and we were kind of surprised to look at some of these statistics around like, oh, according to this survey, Judson is 85% white. And I think we sometimes like to think of ourselves as much more diverse and much more progressive than we might be on paper or our aspirations kind of reach to. But I think that it's important to name the realities that Judson, at least in my experience, is predominantly white. It is largely middle class, relatively affluent, and mostly kind of like white collar professional workers. And that kind of, those truths kind of intentionally or unintentionally create a sort of culture or an environment or certain expectations. And that seeps into kind of like a lot of the things that we do and the way that we operate. Just in my experience on the board and having served within a variety of like lay leadership roles, there are presumptions about like when it is a good time to meet. We presume certain, that like we presume that people come with a certain level of or certain expectations of how like committee work should go, how decisions get made. Like for example, one thing that that showed up in our work as a search committee is that we typically we're meeting in the evenings on weekdays. We did do a lot. We tried to do some intentional work around altering our meeting cadence and our meeting times to be more inclusive. But the fact of the matter is that at least half of our meetings fell during times when it would. I mean, if you had kids. It was dinner time, right? If you had school-age children, it'd be very difficult for you to make those meetings. Or if you had a second job, it would be very difficult for you to make those meetings. If you, if I know that for me, I do a lot of my meetings, and my work as moderator, during normal business hours. I find little pockets in my work day that I don't have a meeting, so I can do a quick call or something with someone, and that presumes a lot, right? It presumes that people have that availability and that flexibility in their day job, and also we can see things about how a lot of Judson, and this is not exclusively Judson, but a lot of the ways in which many churches and nonprofit organizations govern themselves through hierarchical processes and decision making. I think specifically of Robert's Rules of Order, which is rooted in many would argue kind of patriarchal and kind of settler colonialist mindsets around majoritarian rule. So yeah, that's a lot. But I think it's important to name that, we are not separate from the culture of the world in which we live. And as much as we might have aspirations that we can rise above or not be subject to the forces in our world, I think Reverend Julie described them as the powers and principalities. I think that's a biblical reference to kind of the ways in which the world is pulls us away from God's desire for us to live in unison and in harmony with each other. That if we believe, if we aren't intentional and aren't kind of clear-eyed about how powerful those aspects are and how insidious those aspects are, and how they creep into the work that we do together, we can create harm, and we did. And the only way to heal and to correct from that harm is to name it and to take corrective action. And so, some of the things that we tried to do in our work was to set aside a specific individual for who was in charge of arranging meeting times, because we would oftentimes just do meeting times by we're going to vote, and whichever time is best for the most people we're going to do. Even that kind of decision making, it preferences the majority. Sure, it's probably more efficient, but it also leads people who are in the minority to be excluded from that process, kind of implicitly. And also, I just want to name one thing, is that this is something that kind of was illuminated by not only this process, but kind of other, through the transition committee's work and also the Radical Hope task force work, is that, given the fact that, this church is predominantly white, the people of color and other minorities within the congregation serve in lay leadership roles and are called on to serve visibly in important kind of roles at a higher rate than kind of the general kind of congregation populace. And, there is a good intention behind that. I believe it is, we want to make sure that, marginalized voices are centered. But one of the challenges, I think, in that, good intention, or not, I don't know. One of the challenges is that, one, people of color, other minorities who are more likely to, experience financial instability or poverty, who are more likely to, just be generally have like higher amounts of stressors in their life because of racism, homophobia, transphobia, all these things, right? We have this tendency to ask people who categorically will likely have the least capacity, because a lot of our capacity is spent on survival, to show up in roles and in tasks that require a lot of capacity. And so the question becomes like, well, if you're going to ask us to do this work, how are you supporting us in that work? And that's not just giving us the opportunity to for a seat at the table, but there are a whole host of ways in which, before we even get to the table, in which we might need support. And that support can look in a lot of different ways. It's not just meeting times. It can also be like a clear process to surface, either your experiences or your pain during a process, working on a committee. It's a lot of things, but if we're not intentional, we're not clear about like how folks are able to access that support, it can be very lonely and isolating and traumatic. So some other things really quickly. I know that one of the challenges I know that we experience, and this is probably not exclusive to us as a search committee, at least this search committee, was that there was a kind of a big difference between what we envisioned or understood our job to be at the beginning of the process versus the end. I think there was a lot of visioning and a lot of kind of pie in the sky thinking at the very beginning. It was also kind of exacerbated by the fact that we didn't have clear kind of guidelines on budget, at least at the very beginning. I think a lot of those budgetary questions were still being determined by the board, by personnel, by many other folks. And it was, exacerbated by the fact that, Judson is, has been in a period of financial flux. So it's difficult to make some of those calls early on. And so as our process kind of, continued, and the financial realities of what was actually possible, there was, I can say that there was a certain amount of, I think, incongruence or frustrations in the things that we kind of as a committee thought that we had been kind of empowered to do versus the realities of what was actually feasible in terms of the kinds of offers we would feel comfortable making to someone, who we want to hire. And then finally, the one thing I wanted to mention was that as we kind of examined a lot of our candidates that we were interviewing, something that came up during our process was this question of fit, cultural fit. And this is also like a thing that, this is not exclusive to Judson. Cultural fit is something that shows up in, at least in my day job when I'm doing interviews and stuff. And, it's very kind of on its face reasonable, question, but there are a lot of baked in kind of insidious principalities and powers kind of within that question too, right? And those questions can elicit discomfort, pain, sadness for, people of color and other minorities. Because, there's this tension between trying to select a candidate and, all of their aspects of like their theology, their preaching style, their skill set, etc. There's this tension between like, do we select someone who fits or meets the needs of the congregation as it is now, or do we select someone who we feel fits the needs of the congregation to come? When we have set goals as a congregation to be more diverse, to be more, racially, economically, gender just, those questions of fit become very complicated. So I just want to say, to name that as a imperfect part of the process. And I've been talking for a while, so I want to let anyone else on the panel to add their opinions or their experiences or feedback. But thank you for letting me share.
We are sending our gratitude to Jason as they travel today. All right, and our last question for this panel. This process has been full of reflection, and like Jason said, who Judson is and who it wants to be. TJ, can you share what it has been like thinking about those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just so grateful for Jason's words, which I did not know they were going to say before I came up here. And a lot of what they touched on were things I was going to share. Yes, I can stand. That powers and principalities Bible verse, by the way, is my partner's favorite. It says it to me all the time, and it's washing over me with new meaning after hearing Jason talk. I think the other thing, just before I answer that question directly, that Jason illuminated for us throughout the process is that perfection should not be the goal. So as we think about imperfection, perfection actually just doesn't exist. It's a false construct, and the pursuit of it will actually lead you, I think, in counterintuitive ways to what you're driving towards. For me, thinking about who we are and who we want to become felt like a really ominous task for me, honestly. I'll be vulnerable and share that when I first started coming here, I was very intimidated by the legacy that is Judson Memorial Church. As soon as I walked in, I was just like bombarded with all of the history and the legacy that's here. And so I think I was walking into this process feeling like I'd been deputized to represent all of that. And that felt like a really tall order. And I think as we were talking to candidates, we wanted to be really proud of what we brought, our legacy with the arts, with social justice, our, I would say, alternative and dare I say unique approach to theology and worship. And at the same time, you're also trying to be authentic, which at the beginning of this process, I was thinking about it like going on dates with people. And when you go on a date, you like want to look really pretty. You want to have like your best qualities shining through. And as we got further into it, it was also a question of how do I be authentic? Because if this person is going to be coming in relationship with us, we don't want them walking in being sold, a bill of goods that we ultimately can't deliver on. So it was interesting at the same time thinking about what is amazing about Judson and all of our hopes for the future is to also reckon with some of what Jason was talking about. It was interesting, for example, to answer the question of how does Judson deal with conflict that a couple folks asked us of a couple candidates. And I think the other tension that was interesting to navigate as we thought about that process was what Jason noted about like this question of majority rule. I'm reminded of the parable of 3 wolves and 1 sheep deciding what's for dinner by a majority vote is not equity. And so you want to think about, how is everyone experiencing the church? What does everyone hope? I was reminded of the transition report and thinking, there are some places where we have consensus. I don't think anyone in this room or anyone watching on Zoom would say that social justice should not be a part of Judson's future. But of the hundreds of people engaging with that question here, we probably have hundreds of different answers about what it means to prioritize that. And if we do have goals of becoming a more diverse church moving forward, I think we have to be open to thinking about not just being what we've always prided on ourselves of, being a welcoming church. Like, you can come here and you can be a part of what we've got here, but being, a place where people really belong. And maybe people coming in and saying, I want something a little bit different, might mean that we have to change certain aspects of what we have in order to make room for other people to come in. So it was really interesting talking about that. We had a range of people engage with us around that question. One candidate was like, this is a jewel, you have to protect it. Like, you have to figure out how to preserve everything moving forward. And someone else told us we needed to burn everything down if we were going to create something new, which, by the way, had very different reactions from people on our committee, both of those statements. So yeah, a lot of what I've been thinking about is how do we honor the legacy, but also think about moving forward, and then also in moving forward, how do we represent the perspectives of who we have and who we want?
Wonderful, beautiful, thank you. Yeah, can we have some snaps for the panelists? All right, now, will you all rise in body or in spirit for our response in song? And thank you. Now it is time for the offertory. You will see old-fashioned baskets floating around this space. You can also give via Venmo, which you will find in your bulletin. And while we welcome your financial gifts, we invite you to enjoy this creative gift.
I never made this world, I didn't even lose it. And I know no one said it was fair, but they had a garden once, they had a chance to choose it. They gave it away, including my share. And now we're lost in the wilderness, lost crying in the wilderness. And if anyone's watching, it seems they couldn't care less. You're lost in the wilderness. You follow all the rules, you swallow all the stories, and every night we got to feel so free. If you ever have, you know the journey's begun. Hey, what have you got to lose, boy, when already we are lost in the wilderness? And where we are headed, boy, I couldn't even guess. But off we go without a warning, running as we hit the ground, where our future lies a warning, where our hearts are upward bound. To one bright and distant morning we may stop and look around, and there in the wilderness finally we'll be found.
Thank you all so much for being with us this morning. Thank you for receiving the words, hopes, prayers, and musical offerings of this committee. Thank you to the search committee for putting this together. Two things before we close. There'll be no joys and concerns today, so please enjoy the coffee hour, and we hope to see you at the congregational meeting. We did have some birthdays on the committee, like TJ and Peggy, and Lance brought a cake to celebrate. Thank you, Lance. As Judson likes to say, the service here is over, but the real service now begins. Please stand as you are able for our last hymn and go in peace. Thank you.